sure those two sentences go together.
Well, shall we go live? Okay, good evening everybody and welcome to the meeting of the Local Development Framework Subcommittee for the 4th of January 2023. May I open by saying Happy New Year to everybody. It's a pleasure to see you here as early as we are in the new year. Right, does everybody have sight of the agenda? Michael, do you need any papers?
No, I've got the agenda.
Okay, then right, so let's move to agenda item number 1, which is the evacuation procedure. Can I take it everybody understands the evacuation procedure? Nobody wants me to repeat it? No. Okay, thank you much indeed. Apologies for absence or members away on official business. I have apologies from Councillor Toby Clues, but as I understand it, we haven't apologies from anybody else. No? Okay, then, so we note Councillor Chambers' absence.
Well, she might still be on the way here.
Not down the hill and that, right?
Well, pedaling.
I'm sure you're right.
Yeah, she's coming on the electric bike. It might not be as electric as you expect.
Okay. Agenda item number 3. Members, does anybody have any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests? No? Thank you very much indeed. That takes us rapidly on to agenda item number 4, which are minutes of the meeting of the LDF held on the 28th of November 2022, which are in your pack. Can we please do them for accuracy first? So page 1, which is page 3 of 153 in your pack, and page 2, which is page 4 of 153 in your pack. Can I please have your agreement that they are a true and accurate record and to be adopted?
Yeah.
Thank you much indeed. Okay. Doc, do we have any matters arising from those minutes?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, I think we had some healthy debate, didn't we? But I don't think we made any actions for this meeting. Okay, then, good. Thank you. That moves us on to agenda item number 5, which is the provision of waste and bin storage facilities for new developments. And there is a paper in our pack, which is page 5 of 153. Dorothy.
What you have before you is a document that went out for consultation in September to November. There was 5 representations made. The idea is that if there's any comments from you this evening, they'd be taken forward to the planning board on Monday evening, where we hope it will seek adoption of the SPD. It's the first one in agenda item 5 is to do with waste and in particular bin storage and the provision of bins. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, then, members, you have the report in front of you. Obviously, this strategy supports the council's commitment to climate change, particularly around recycling. And while we went out to consultation, there wasn't a great deal of response, was there? We had some developer responses who were primarily who have interests in site H4 at Poldsworth and Dordon, which councillors Hancock and Oswald might be interested in. But outside that, I don't think there was anything to note. And then the SPD itself is on page 17 of the pack, which quite nicely lays out everything that should be done, including the provision that developers purchase the bins for new residents and they purchase them to the standard that North Warwickshire Boroughs Council prescribes. Councillor Simpson.
Technically, they don't purchase them. They pay an initial fee.
Meet the whole cost.
Things remain the property of the council. Chairman, I broadly support all of this. I think it's all very sensible and will help us. I just wonder that and I note the word is should rather than will, but where we're saying that the storage point should be no more than 30 metres from the main access to a house, and I'm looking at single households here, and should be no more than 25 metres from the collection point, and that goes on into other things as well.
Yeah.
I'm relieved because it should, but I think that could end up, whilst it's fine as a principle, could end up causing occasional issues. So as long as we can emphasise within here that should means a general provision, and it's not to be taken literally in every respect, because there will be some locations, frankly, where that's inappropriate. You know, particularly in rural areas. You know, I'm thinking of farms in particular, where to look at an agricultural property where the bin is no more than 25 metres from the collection point is frankly hopeful. So broadly, and in the more urban areas as well, I think that works. But there are other areas where it won't work.
Dot?
Yeah, I was just reading just to see if we could possibly include something in there that explains that it is a preference rather than an absolute need.
And I'd say, Chairman, in a normal housing environment, it's spot on, I think. You know, I think for the majority of new development, that's going to be perfectly reasonable. And I think for us to be able to say to people, there is generally a maximum distance that you've got to haul this heavy bin to get it to our collection point. That's a good social benefit. So I'm not against it. It's just in some particularly more extreme rural areas, it could be interpreted unhelpfully.
Okay, well let's. I've got Nick and then I've got Dave. So the proposal is that obviously we take this to planning board for adoption on Monday.
Yes.
Would you need to do any clarification on the basis of Councillor Simpson's comments?
If members wish, I can put that towards the planning board on Monday evening as a suggested alteration from this subcommittee, and that we can put that forward on Monday evening, and we can agree some wording perhaps before then as to what would be appropriate.
Okay, is everybody happy with that? Michael, is your point about Mark?
Yeah, it is. It's in relation to Mark's point that I support what he said. I think there's going to be times where logistically or for whatever unknown reasons, it's not quite able to fulfill things exactly. So I think Mark's right to point out that the wording needs to reflect that it's the ambition and the purpose to try and get it like that. But if for any valid set of reasons it needs to be closer or further, then that should be considered.
Okay, noted. Thank you. Dave, are you on the same point or a new point?
It's a slightly new point.
Well, can I just hold you there then for a second? So, are you happy, Dot, that you'll be able to just draft a set of words which is tight enough to ensure people comply, but loose enough to manage exceptions?
I think that's where it could be something along the lines of that where it doesn't comply with this, evidence would need to be supplied to explain the reasons why. And it may be then that could be taken on board then. So
Okay, you both happy with that?
Yeah.
I think that makes
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Thanks. Okay then. Clive?
Just to comment on two aspects of that. Sorry.
I think you're going to be a bit quiet like me.
Just to comment on two aspects at that point. The first is that the legal comments do highlight the status of a supplementary planning document, that it's obviously a material consideration. It's not part of the local plan itself. Obviously, it's of great weight, but in any specific application, it will be balanced against the other information provided. And so, to emphasise on Dot's point, that therefore, if there's evidence to show that another approach is appropriate, members can take that into account. And then the other thing, which is covered in the document itself, is just to say that regardless of the requirements in relation to a particular planning application, that wouldn't prejudice the council's use of its statutory powers regarding provision of bins, collection points, etc. So there is a separate regime that's sits outside of that. Now, obviously, we would hope that this is largely compliant and will work well with our entry processes, etc. But again, even post-development, if the council has a particular issue and it's justified to do so, they can impose other requirements using those processes and Environmental Protection Act. So there is some give, if you want to call it that, to deal with particular cases under either approach.
Okay, excellent. They'll be happy with that. Yep. David?
I'm just trying to get a clarification, if I could, Doc, about. I was reading it here that you said that no more than 30 metres access to the house, and no more than from the 25 from the collection point. So there are two different locations they are within the way it's written. The collection store, it means that every day you've got to take your rubbish to that 30-metre point, and then maybe the bin's got to be moved to where. And I'm thinking of a site that may happen in the near future in Shuttleton, where less than half the road is going to be adopted, and the turnaround is in the first half. And then there's 15 other houses further round on the horseshoe. And the collection point is more than 30 metres. I'm thinking about that at the moment. And I just referring back to my father, that when he lived down in Eastbourne before he died, he had to have assistance to get bins out of his garden to where they could be collected. Are we going to be sending people to these houses so that people that need assistance will be able to get the bins out where they can be collected? And I'm thinking 25 metres. My dad couldn't have moved it 10 metres from the one end of the garden to the next. And I'm just thinking there are lots of people like that.
Dot?
Thank you.
In terms of the assistance through the council, there is an assistance scheme that is available.
There is, yeah.
And I'm afraid I don't know the details of who is eligible to that, but I'm sure that anybody who is can apply through that. But in terms of what is said here, it's trying to get the balance between where that storage point should be in order to make sure that it's then possible to drag a heavy bin the distance required. And so what we've been explained is that it should be no more than 20 metres, but 30 metres from the house, but then to where it's collected is another 25 metres. So that's 55 metres in total. That's
what I was reading, and that's a significant long point for people to move a bin.
It is.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and I've got two comments. I will say, David, that I know that the assistance team are very, very good, because every time they miss a certain bin in Coleshill, the householder is straight onto them and they come the very next day.
I'm just thinking of that because I mean earlier on in this particular site it talks about bins not being able to be seen, etc. And I'm just thinking that one site there's 24 houses going to be built, 14 or 15 of those houses are going to have to move the bins 40, 50 metres to where, and we're planning to fail. That's what I can see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael, and then Mark.
Mine, it really was a point on what Dave just said as well. It seems as if I should be sitting over there tonight, but I think he comes up with a good point that a lot of the public will ask. That's one of the first things I think that'll pop into the mind. People who have got who are infirm or any sort of movability or disability needs, how are they going to get the bins? So we've got the program in place, like Chair says. So I think this is highlighted tonight that we probably need to publicise that a little bit to let people know that that solution is available.
Yeah, totally. Mark?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to go to what Councillor Pierce was saying, and I think what he's done is highlighted the value of having this supplementary planning guidance. Because when it's there, that will give the development control team more ability to actually say, look, our standard is 30 and 25. What I think we increasingly need to do, and I genuinely have seen an increase in the number of applicants who don't want to have fully adoptable estate roads.
Yes.
And the issue for me is that actually we should be, as far as we can, having adoptable estate roads to remove this. But where we have and adopt part adoptable and part unadoptable, with the SPG in place, I think that would give our colleagues more opportunity to say, look, this is now our policy. If you are putting the bins effectively further away than this total 55 or effectively 25 from the collection point, now you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And that, so I think to an extent, David, what this is saying will actually help us to not have those scenarios where people have got to drag their bins halfway across Paul Street and then up a hill as well, you know. So and I think I'm aware of the site you're talking about, and you know, some applicants should know better.
Yeah, could I just add one more thing? I'm just thinking, just having only driven through the town just before Christmas. Have you been in the square when everybody comes out of what used to be called Phoenix Yard, and there's only half the houses built, but they come up past Beckerson's old shop, through the and past the Angel, and there's at least 40 bins when the green bins and the red bins are there. There's at least 40 bins in the square, and they take all night. They arrive, and they take all day to disappear. I'm very aware of that becoming an issue.
Okay.
And we designed to fail there because we designed a place where nobody can get out the bins and they have to be put somewhere to be serviced. Thank you.
Hence the need for the guidance. Dorothy.
Just one point of clarification that I should say is that this is not policy. This is a guidance document. The local plan, that's the policy. This is the guidance which is added onto it. So it's just to be clear that this is not an actual policy itself.
And apologies, I misspoke with that. I recognise it's guidance, but sometimes, you know, it's like the Pirates Code, isn't it?
And we're certainly having parley without any doubt whatsoever. Yeah. Michael, you've got the honour of the last comment.
Mine's a separate point, really.
Really?
Yes, it's a separate point, unusually. I just think that with it being so forefront like this, and we're bringing it up at the planning, gives us chance to actually make sure that the public know that these developers have to apply the same standards that the council have in relation to the bins. At the minute, obviously, the council have a good relationship with people if bins go missing and there's quality of the bins. So this guidance will give us chance to sort of make sure that they're following the standards that we've already set.
Totally. Right, members, I believe that we've parlayed long enough. So there's two recommendations to put to the vote. First one is that members note the report. Can I ask you've all noted it? Excellent, thank you. And then the second one is that the comments made by the meeting tonight go to the planning board on Monday. And Dorothy, you will make the amendments that we have suggested and circulate them for information before 5 o'clock on Monday when we start our respective pre-meets, because it's only a thin agenda on Monday. I need to be clear about that. There's hardly anything to discuss on Monday. Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Don't we need to vote on that second one?
Okay.
Don't we need to vote on that?
Yeah, I certainly do. Just give me a chance. I'm just.
Rest of the voice.
I have Mr. Tobin sitting to my right, who will make sure I do everything properly.
So for the second, if you proposed it.
Yeah, I'll propose. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Dan. All those in favour? Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Therefore, unanimous. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 6, which is page 21 of your pack, which is the supplementary planning document for planning obligations for open space, sport and recreation. Dorothy.
This follows on from the previous SPD, so this was out for consultation at the same time as the previous one. Again, it's to be noted, and then any comments taken to planning board on Monday evening. So again, what you have is the statement of consultation on page 24, which said that there was 10 representations for this, and then there's a summary of all the representations. And then you'll see in the far cut column where we've suggested any changes to the SPD. And then all the way through to page 59 of your pack is the actual draft, actual proposed to be adopted SPD. And that goes all the way through to page 131 of your pack. Again, I'm happy to take any questions or to pass on any comments to the planning board.
Okay, then, members, obviously quite significant consultation responses to this one when you read through, and I know that in the pre-meets we've had a chat about some of those responses, so who would like to kick off? Dan.
The first point is that I've said this in other meetings as well, that we continually go by Sports England on the strategic sports centres or any facilities. So we say within a 15-mile drive or 15-minute drive, that is suitable for getting to a football pitch, rugby pitch, whatever it is, or sports centre, etc. I think the issue that we do with this is that we take Sport England's view and they make an average of the whole United Kingdom. We need to be looking more at the borough. From Polesworth, you could go 15 minutes and you could be the other side of the borough. You don't want people travelling to the other side of the borough for a game of football or for their football pitches. My concern is obviously with Polesworth and Dordon is that there is about 2,000 houses, for example, to go in. There is also no pitches for Polesworth Swifts, their club at the moment. And we're saying that as long as they can travel 15 miles, they're fine, but that wouldn't be Polesworth anymore. So I think that we do need to highlight that when we're taking, I know this is just a supplement like document that helps plan, but I do think that when we come into these larger developments, that 15 miles in North Warwickshire will take you completely 4 villages down the road. So it becomes less of an option for these people. We stop them from being local. It's really weird, but Dordon will say local is Polesworth or Woodend, not Aviston. It's that silly, but I think we do need to look at that when it comes to that 15 miles is not suitable.
Yeah. Okay, are you clear on that, Dot?
Yes, I'm just
Okay.
writing down. Yeah. So could I just ask then, is there any proposed changes then that you would like the planning board to take into consideration
So
as a result of that?
again, this would probably be a brief, but for me, I think that we need to understand what would we class as a large development. So in my head, I say anything we've put in here, something like over 200 houses, something I've read, but we should be saying that if there's this amount of development within a vicinity, there should be this kind of pitches available, whatever it is. I can't come up with figures like that, and I wouldn't want to, but I think it needs to say in the document something along the lines that the planning board need to recognise that there is a need for playing pitches if a large development is taking place or something like that, because these guidelines are quite rigid. That's my point.
Okay, I've got a number of people interested, but and I presume when you're talking about playing pitches, you're talking about football, rugby and cricket.
Yeah.
So perhaps it might be interesting, Dot, if anybody could, for us, source us a map of where the facilities are in North Warwickshire and whether they are open to multi-use. So, for example, we know that Aviston football pitch, which is owned by the borough, is not open to multi-use. However, there are other locations where you can rent, such as Baddesley, you can rent a pitch, and regardless of where you come from, you can have that pitch for that period that you rent it. So I suppose part of the discussion there is a thinking around what our investment strategy would be, and whether we need to weight it towards particularly with a view to new builds at H4, significant new builds, and to be cognizant of the over demand on existing facilities at those locations, but also to think about whether we shouldn't be looking at sports pitches which are open to use by any organisation. That makes sense?
Yes, if I can just draw your attention though that this is assessing the requirements of a particular development. So we would use this when we would look at, say, H4, we would use this as a starting point to understand what the needs were in that particular area in terms of the on-site provision and off-site perhaps provision or contributions. But also what the council's also produced is the playing pitch strategy as well, which is very clear as far as I can recall in terms of what it seeks in particular areas. So say for Polesworth, it has got an idea in there of how many pitches it requires within the Polesworth area. So those two documents would be read jointly and not separately.
Yeah.
So there would be that overall issue being considered. So this helps in terms of the calculations of how much do we need, whereas the playing pitch strategy has looked at multiple use sites, whether they're 3G or 4 or whatever. So that's a slightly different strategy in terms of that's the overall provision, whereas this is seeking as a result of that development, what should we be asking for? What can we ask for? And major developments are always ones that are over 0.2 hectares and 5 dwellings is normally considered to be a major application. I'm sure that's right, that I've got that figure. But if it isn't right, I will get back to you and confirm that. But so it's slightly different, but does that deal with your concern about that?
But I think it's interesting. I suppose one of the things that we were looking at, Dot, was the table on 123 of the draft SPD, which talks about playing pitches, and then it lists the sports. But it appears to make a statement in the far right column that investment in the playing pitches for those listed sports could be anywhere across the borough. So the point of the discussion that we were having earlier was, if you've got significant development in some locations, do we need to be more specific about that investment being at those locations?
Sure.
This doesn't look at individual sites. These are only examples of the calculations. And what we would do when we get a plan application is that we would fill this in as in terms of the number of people that are actually on the site, the number of dwellings and things like that. And then it would come up with a possible answer in terms of what the requirements would be for those particular developments. And as far as I can recall, on larger sites, the preference is always for on-site contributions wherever possible. I know with open spaces, that's been at the medium-sized sites, increasingly the leisure team are saying, well, instead of having a contribution or a smaller area on site, we'd prefer it to go to making a better use of or expanding on an existing site, because that makes better use of that particular perhaps contribution or whatever. So each individual case would then be considered on its merits in terms of, is it on site, is it off site as well? I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, because I don't think we've got the answers, and the open space SPD is not providing you with the answers to those allocations and saying allocation H4 is going to have X. That's still a calculation that we need to do. And I know that Simon has got that on his list of jobs to actually provide us with that information.
Okay, so I'm conscious that there are 3 people wanting to speak, and I'm exercising my right. I suppose the question that I'd be grateful for an answer for, if you could just answer it to everybody present, is it totally understand about improving existing facilities?
Yeah.
But if we have significant development and there is no additional capacity on existing facilities, even if we make huge improvements to them, how can we ensure that additional capacity is provided? That makes sense.
Yeah, as part of this though, that if there is already a provision in the area, you would perhaps say, right, well, the first answer would be on site. But if there's already an existing provision, you would perhaps say, is it better to upgrade that provision, or is it better to have more provision? And it may be that it's a balance between the two at the time that the planning application is considered. But at the moment, the preference probably as a starting point would say we want everything on site, because at least then the developer knows from point A, yes, it needs to be on site. I know that there is a reference in one section that talks about off-site contributions, and that is on certain size of sites. Very quickly, I'll just see if I can find it. It's going to take me too long to find. No, sorry, I can't point you in the direction of that particular paragraph. But there is a paragraph in there that does talk about this issue about on and off-site provision. But equally, also within the local plan as a policy, we require open space provision. As you see in the appendix, we've got the local plan actually listed, and it's LP 29, I want to say.
And it's
LP 22, sorry.
Yeah.
And that's on what, page 117. And you see there, we actually talk about open spaces and recreational provision. So this SPD actually complements that policy of LP 22, which asks wherever possible, open spaces, recreation areas will be retained, protected and enhanced. And development proposals will be expected to provide a range of new on-site and open space recreational provision. So there's already that within and as an adopted policy within the local plan.
okay. Okay. Do we need to clarify any more about that, members? Is that about this issue, or is that a new point?
It's about what Dan's raised and my view.
Yeah, go on, Michael.
Yeah, so I think Dan's right to raise about Sport England because they take things very geographically. It's just points on a map, whereas obviously our communities do quite well like that. And dots, obviously, the SPD, you've explained it very well. It's based on calculations and things like that. But our communities, being a council in Polesworth and very close to Dordon, are going to want to see the real world sort of examples of this. So the housing, obviously, it's going to come no matter what, that time's gone. But these communities have got to be cohesive and together. So anything that's suggested, I think, should be a sort of shake hands between location and need. All the communities should be sort of, it's not a tack on these things that we're putting in Dordon and Polesworth. It's supposed to be together. So I'm hopeful that the opportunities will be taken to sort of look through all of these, and where multi-use spaces can be put in, like football, cricket, rugby, floodlights so they can be used in the evening maybe, or lighting system that you can turn on and off, things like that, that sort of keep it within the communities, but it not necessarily have to be off-site or on-site. It's where it fits in best.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. David, is yours?
Yeah, thanks for letting me speak again, but Dan's passionate about it. I know Dan's a referee, and he helps run the youth teams, and he's totally wrapped up in it, and all power to him for doing that. I've got 3 grandsons that play football in Warwickshire. I know that Atherstone Rangers, I don't know how many you've got in the Swifts, but Atherstone Rangers got 23 youth teams. How many have you got at the Swifts?
12.
12. So that's the sort of, I actually think we need to, and I will make this contribution on Monday. We need to, I think, go back, because I know that Dan has looked for pitches at different times. They've got you, and my grandson sometimes have to look for pitches, and they all end up playing in Tamworth, in Nuneaton, to get those games in. So I actually wonder if our base numbers are wrong in the first place, because it's all right talking about multi-sport. It's all about football, really. If you get whether you like it or not, you go to the back of next June. There will be a knockout competition at the back of Polesworth School. There will be at least 400 kids play football there. You won't see 400 kids playing rugby. I'm not knocking it for that, but all I'm just saying, there'll be 400 kids. There'll be grandparents like me cheering them on and all that stuff. So I wonder if our base numbers are right in the first place. And coming back to extra pitches, I know at the moment we have a design or semi-designing for what might happen up at Roby's Lane. And I know there's 3 pitches included up there of different sizes, up to a size 11 as well. And we don't know what will happen at St Helena or stuff like that. But I've got a question for Mr. Tobin, is it possible? When it comes to 106 money, we can only ask 5 times, can't we? For money for a particular project.
No, that's abolished.
Is that abolished? Okay, so we could go back at different, because I'm just thinking at the moment, the amount of money that has been taken from 350 houses in Walton, there's a few 20, 30,000's gone to sports and open spaces. $500,000's gone to the schools, etc. like that. I don't think we're necessarily asking for enough money. And the reason I say that, behind Costa Coffee on the A5, we resurrected that pitch. We brought 2 pitches, a youth pitch and a full-size pitch back into play there. Cost £78,000. Asking 106 for 25 grand isn't going to do it. We can't get the improvements. 78 grand to be able to drain it properly, regrade it and make it. And I don't know if you played on that, Dan, since it's been brought up to date, but that's now used 4 nights a week, Saturdays and Sunday, and the ground has to be looked after that well to be able to get that capacity. So if we can load all the kids onto the grounds, eventually they're not playable because they get compacted. So do we ask, is our base numbers right? I would like to ask that question. And do we ask for enough money? Because we're never going to improve with 20 or 30,000 inputs. We need hundreds of thousands.
Okay, so have you withdrawn your question to Mr. Tobin?
No, I'd like to know. I'll draw the question, because if that's been abolished, I thought it would be.
You're off the hook.
But I'm sure Mr. Tobin's got an answer. How many times we could ask?
Do you have an answer to?
Very simply, obviously, you can't sort of double dip. If you have a demand, just say, for instance, there was demand for 1 pitch and it's going to cost 100,000. You can't ask 5 developers for a total of 150,000. Because obviously then we're profiting out of it. So obviously there will always be a calculation to be done based on the need from a particular development. But I think the issue which is being identified is the fact that it's not always a static situation where you have a number of houses which will bring a demand in that one area, which is specific only to that development. There is other need in those areas, and obviously it's how much is caused from that particular development, which is their reasonable contribution. If there's existing demand there for a pitch before those houses are built, how much does it go up? And that's the thing that needs to be looked at, from the size of the development, the existing provision. So it is always if you like, an evidence-based approach to show that we are justified in asking for the amount of concern on a particular occasion.
Well, if I could add to that, I'm thinking of Arley now. By the old Arley Sports Centre there. There's 4 or 5 pitches down there. They won't play any football on there now till about next March. It's brilliant place. There's facilities, everything's there, except when it rains. And when it rains, and it's about upgrading the grounds, and that's what I'm asking for. More money to upgrade what's there, and also keep up with the population growth. I'll shut up now.
So that's the sort of thing that, with evidence to show that an existing pitch, for example, is going to be used further and therefore needs to be of a higher quality, then obviously the amount of contribution can be based on the evidence to show, for example, that more drainage is required for that pitch, even if there isn't a need to provide different pitches or additional pitches. If it's going to be intensifying the use and there's a need for works to be done for that, that can be perfectly justifiable. Obviously, depending on the application and particular development and the evidence demand in that case.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Interesting. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, and I have a range of comments. The first one specifically relates to the consultation responses, page 46. And in 45 and 46, the consultees basically saying we should think again about how much, if you like, peripheral landscaping, footpaths and what have you, counts towards the amount of open space. My only comment is our response that should have envelopes on at the end of it. I fundamentally agree with what we're saying. I just think it's totally inappropriate that all these bits of spare land is almost should be including land that's unattractive to you. I mean, our response here that open space land is intended for a purpose and it has a value in itself is absolutely right. And I wouldn't wish us to change that in any way. It's important that we have the emphasis and the intent right. But what I'm not particularly clear on is the response to the question on section 633, where the questioner seemed to me to be saying, well, I'll read it out. The requirement for all new public space should be at least 0.2 hectares in size. And this requirement could, he says would, but I'm saying could, exclude the provision of informal green space provided by a number of smaller spaces, such as pocket parks. And I think in good urban design, there really is a value in pocket parks and small areas of open space. If I've read it properly, I don't think our policy is excluding that. It's saying that there has to, if we're looking at this as big open space, got to be 0.2 hectare. But I just want to be clear that within this, there is still the opportunity for us to provide and negotiate the provision of pocket parks and small areas as opposed to a big area. Yeah. Because there are real societal advantages and disadvantages. Earlier on, Chair, I had to use my phone to add in Oldman, in what is 0.2 hectares. It's 21,500 square feet. That's a pretty big space. And that can create problems if you're the family living next door to 21,500 square feet of open space. It tends to get quite noisy. And so quite often we'll end up trying to look at smaller areas, and pocket parks, I think, are a great example. I don't think that this policy is saying we can't do that. Yeah. I think what it's saying is that to count as this particular thing, it's got to be 0.2, but there are other provisions elsewhere that allow us to have pocket parks and other facilities. But if Dorothy could just confirm my understanding of that, because I think the provision of these smaller areas of public open space in development is really important and can be really valuable, particularly, I have to say, for the elderly.
Can't get a football pitch on full 21,000.
And that's the reason.
Dorothy, please.
Football.
In terms of the, I think it is because of the reference to the size of the area. And in the green space strategy, the council's green space strategy, we have a preference that we shouldn't be going for very small incidental open spaces because of the cost of maintenance and because of the cost and the issues that they can bring. However, when you're planning an estate, you must have landscaping and borders and things like that. And so it's not saying no to those areas as long as perhaps they are linear areas. So you've got somewhere perhaps along a footpath that you actually then have trees next to and a new hedgerow and things like that that link up with other areas. But it's where they are isolated, not overlooked. It's those areas that as far as I can recall from the Green Space Strategy, that they're trying to get out away from. And so it's that sort of balance between making sure that a place is green enough and pleasant enough that people want to live there, but also from that safety and community safety point of view as well. And that, as far as I can recall, is the particular issue then.
And I understand all that, Chair. And positively, I would not want us to start adding up all the bits of hedgerow and tree line countable as public space, because I don't think it is. It is open space, arguably. But in many ways, it's not actually usable for the residents or for anybody else. The motorist uses it because it looks better when you're driving along. But to be usable, I don't think you can start counting hedgerows. But I do think, and I accept the point in terms of maintenance, but increasingly these days, it's actually not the local authority that's maintaining it. We quite often will leave that to the management company of an estate. So I think the argument over cost effectiveness of maintenance is last year's war, not next year's war. But I do think there is a value. So I'd like us to have an opportunity to continue the provision of smaller areas alongside the very valuable contribution that these larger areas will provide. I think for me, it's an opportunity to meet a variety of needs from all the potential occupiers and residents, not just those that want the 21,500 square feet spots, but particularly in an area where more elderly residents are.
Yeah.
Smaller areas are particularly valuable. Chairman, I have a couple of other questions.
Let me just check, Michael. I know Michael wanted to add to that debate.
Yeah, it's just, again, on the point that Mark raised, that through experience of some of the larger developments in other parts of my life, that the developers sometimes have a habit of, there'll be little pockets of land that they don't want as part of the development, and they'll just leave it. We're not adopting, that's just left. And then it becomes either an antisocial black spot or hot spot, I should say, or just overgrown, and nobody's really taking any responsibility to sort of keep it. So Mark's sort of take on looking at these spaces as an opportunity to do something. I'm not exactly sure what in all the, it might be benches, it might be whatever, but taking an opportunity to look at it surely can't hurt. I think it's wise that we're mentioning it, and I think the public would want us to mention that sort of thing.
And to emphasise that, Chairman, I think you'll remember, David, at the Hatters, there is a pretty small area of land that we designed in as open space, and a number of development sites, we've got these pocket parks, effectively. That I'm sure that's still possible because we do it by negotiation as part of the wider spatial planning, but they can be really
Quite. And they can also be, as you say, really, they can be multifunctional. So they can be biodiversity offset. They could provide sustainable urban drainage. They could provide a play area. Yes, it's certainly something to think about going forward on an application by application basis. So, Dot, my goodness, we're putting you through some grilling tonight. Do you believe that we need to change anything, the wording of anything in the guidance
I must admit, I haven't heard anything this evening so far in this section to say that I feel as if there needs to be a change, but I'll take your comments away and I'll ruminate over them. But there isn't anything that jumps out at me that says we could automatically change X to be more reflective of what you're saying, because I think it is only guidance. It isn't a policy itself. Whereas the green space strategy has been adopted, the playing pitch strategy has been adopted by the council. So, and this just adds into explaining how we would ask for those contributions and what we would expect to be on site. So it's not a precursor saying that this is and must be followed absolutely to the letter every time. There will always be that element of negotiation throughout the process.
So what you're advising, as I'm following your argument, is actually the documents are here to make us think and to provide room for negotiation as opposed to setting clear policy.
Yeah, because it's not a policy document, it's trying to set the framework as to what we would be asking for. I would like to go away and talk to Simon Powell, and I'll make sure that we have a good discussion about it as well, and see if there is anything and can come back to members.
Okay. Look, would you be able to have those discussions before Friday when we have a weekly plan agreement?
I'll certainly try my best to make sure I speak to him tomorrow.
Right, maybe we can consider it then. So, David, was that related to that point?
I've got one other question, if I may, Chair.
Related to the same point, or no?
Is it? I was considering the drib and drab effect, if you like. I'll just think about H4 area now. So, if you look at the Taylor Wimpey is up there, there's an area there already allocated for 690 houses in the first part of what would be the thousands of houses going up towards the A5. They built 143. On that 143, there's a green area between the roundabout and the first houses, which mostly is on one side is an attenuation pond, and there's a bit of grass on the other side. But that's got you can't join that to anything else because there's the B5000 and then the houses. Now, if they then take the next of the 690, because there's an allocation there already, and they decide to do another 143, do we end up with a small parcel for that 143 and then another small part? And we don't end up with an entity, if you like, you see what I mean, that's big enough to do anything other than have a piddly little area that the kids, toddlers can play on.
Okay, Dot, how do we avoid having piddly little areas?
That's not a technical word, by the way.
Oh, well, H4 is an allocation as a whole. So even if the applications came forward individually, the policy does say it should be in accordance with the master plan. And it's that master plan that we need to be working on to make sure that that doesn't happen.
So we've got 8 different developers there, Doc, for example, which could quite easily happen, as we all know.
Yeah.
I mean, when I moved on to Mill Race View, there was 7 developers on that area there. And I just wonder and so can we force that at that front end that they actually end up with a space that is significant necessarily?
Well, because we have asked in the policy for the local plan that there will be a master plan for the whole of H4, yes, we would still, if a planning application came forward in a piecemeal way, I mean, potentially, because it would then be against the policy, you could potentially refuse an application, because it's not being considered as part of that whole. What we have been working towards is trying to make sure that all of the landowners, agents are working comprehensively with the parish councils. I know they haven't been directly involved much more recently, but at some stage in the future, again, we need that parish council involvement there again, to make sure that it is a comprehensive master plan and that the council supports that. So when there is a planning application that comes forward, everybody knows very clearly that where the open space is going to be, where the school's going to go and the community facilities, so that it's very clear when those applications come forward who's paying for what as well. So that's what we're working towards.
Thank you very much.
In touch wood.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael, is that
Yeah,
continuing or new?
No, it's new. So,
We'll let Mark finish his other points then, and then we'll come to you on new.
Thanks, John. My second point was really, and it's on the Appendix D of the policy. It follows on from what you were saying in terms of, 15 miles might be all right nationally, but here it's not. And this is really relating to the maintenance cost calculation base, which I think it's been indexed from the BICS paper. No, BICS is fine. It's a national instrument. I use it a lot at work. But not that long ago, we were regularly sort of looking at the costs of provision of service in North Warwickshire and other sparsely or more sparsely populated rural areas. And we know that our costs of emptying the bins are more expensive than it is in an urban area because they've got to travel a lot further. And the cost of emptying the bins in Atherstone is less than the cost of emptying the bins in Whittaker, for example. So my question really is, are we comfortable that we are going to be covering our cost base and covering the 25-year maintenance cost using the BICS statistics? When my assumption, I have to say, is that our costs will tend to be higher than the national arrangement, A, because we're a small authority, and B, because we're a more rural authority, and it will cost us more to do it. So I've gone to my final question, or
Related or separate? I mean, that's a hell of a question. Do you want to take an answer to that?
The only thing that I can say is that I'll have to speak to Simon and that and make sure that he's happy with the costings. That's something I'm not directly involved with.
Chairman, my assumption is it's going to be a bit light, and how we project that forward for 25 years with inflation at the minute is good luck to anybody trying to do that. My final question is more strategic, and if we look at the calculation, the collection, delivery, and use of Section 106 and other funding over the last X years, it's been low. It's been low because a lot of the time we actually haven't had a lot of development. So other parts of Warwickshire have got significantly more Section 106 and other funding from developers because they've done a lot more development than we have. But one of the things that has become painfully clear to me is we don't maximise the opportunity. Now, I know every site has a real ceiling in terms of the viability as to what it can generate. But if we look at the majority of funding that we get, about 80% goes to county council for education and other strategic functions. There's a bit there. But we're looking over the next 10 years at a significant amount of development in North Warwickshire. And it's essential that we use things like this SPD and follow on from its adoption to generate the maximum value for our towns and villages and the residents of them that we can. And I think this sets out a great opportunity for us to rationalise how we're asking for benefit and how we quantify that benefit. And that's great. But the other side of that equation has got to be the ability to do it and the ability across the authority to generate the requests and to substantiate what those requests are. And I guess, Chairman, my question to you and then on to the planning board is, do we think we have the resource base that will enable us to do that? A, to calculate the request, and B, to deliver it. And part of my head is thinking, I know there's a chunk of 106 that hasn't been spent, and one of the reasons it's not been spent is we haven't got the resources to actually get people to work up those plans. So I'd just like to float the idea through this board, Chairman, that then gets onto the planning board to say maybe executive committee should look at, have we got the right level of resource to enable us to maximise the potential benefit so that we can ensure that all of the great things that are envisioned in this supplementary planning guidance actually are turned into reality. And I suspect that means we need to employ somebody to help us do it.
Oh, I think that's an excellent suggestion. Dot, I presume that the best way to deal with this would be to raise it with Mr. Maxey, and perhaps it would be something for our new head of financial services to consider, our new 151, when they are appointed. Or do you have a different answer?
No, I'm in your hands on that one. I'm sure
could we
raise it as well. So
Could we raise that, and then we'll ensure that we follow it through at exec next time we meet as an exec. You want exec, Mark?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. You've got half the members of the executive already then. Okay, anyway, any more questions, or was that the last one?
That was it, Chairman. I just think we have one opportunity with the development that's coming our way.
Totally.
And you know, we really have got to bring whatever benefit out of it we can.
Totally. All right. Michael, you've waited a long time.
Yeah, I'm the only one sitting over here, so mine's a bit of a summary as well, really. So, for context, obviously, I was against the development in Polesworth and Dordon, as were a lot of the residents in Polesworth and Dordon, and there were some for it as well, just to give some balance. But I think they would expect me to say that they're going to want to see some local improvements coming out of the 106 money for Polesworth, Dordon specifically, not just for the new bit of the build, but the residents that already live in Polesworth and Dordon that it's going to affect, really. I don't think anybody's ever denied that that's going to happen, so it's more me just verbalising it than saying I don't believe it's going to happen. And I'm sure Dorothy would agree there's enough in these documents to hold the developers' feet to the fire, and some of the ideas that we've come out with tonight will enhance that even further. But I'm hoping that we're going to be pushing against an open door with the developers, because when they came here and presented what they were going to do for that site, they obviously need to sell houses, and to sell the houses and make it attractive and a great place to live and a good community, they're going to want the best that they can possibly put there. And that's all that I think now can help to ensure, because that time, as I said earlier, is gone. So I'm sure Dan would agree. We just want the best quality and the most future-proofed look we can for the whole setup. Improvement of the pitches, like Dave said over there as well. That's got to be part of it.
Mark?
Completely agree. That's got to be part of the whole process. You know, the way we were looking at in developing the plan, and you know, some of the areas that we're looking at where the development, it's not just Polesworth and Dordon, it's Ansley too, and all the other areas. For me, if those areas don't see the benefit of the investment, then we've got it wrong. Totally got it wrong. It has to be like that. And I can tell you, I mean, you know, who knows what happened in May, whether I've been sacked as chairman of planning or I haven't. I funded personally and utterly committed to delivering on that, because people have to see the benefit of it. I have regularly said how much I dislike Section 106 because I see it as an ineffective method.
It's a bit ethereal.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily get to a real delivery of people having a positive to sit against the negative. And quite often you get the money and then it takes years for it to be delivered. So yeah, I'm not a Section 106 fan, but frankly, compared to the community infrastructure levy, it's light years more positive. And you know, it's not perfect, but it's not as negative as some of the other things are. So it's what we've got, and we should use it. But I think it absolutely has to show a benefit to the communities that are putting up with the development as much as anywhere else. Some of this will benefit all of us, you know. But frankly, if a huge part of your community is being built on, you need to see some pluses out of it.
Excellent. Right, I can see you're all having a good time because we've been going for an hour already. And I don't think you said it.
I'm not too worried about football, but Man City kicks off at 8 o'clock.
The Wolves kick off at 8.
All right, well, let's go to the recommendations on the report. I presume all debate has now exhausted itself. So the recommendations are that members note the report and that any comments made by members at the meeting will be reported to the board on the 9th of January. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Hancox. Seconder? Thank you, Councillor Osborne. And all those in favour? Excellent.
You did that really well.
Thank you very much.
You know, I was going to sort of hint.
Well, you've spoken at you've raised your hand for every other item, so.
Might as well be consistent.
Yeah, okay, then. Right, agenda item number 7. Future work plan. Dot.
This report just brings 3 main items just for information. And if I run through each of them, and then I'm happy to take any questions. So the first one is what's called the HEDNA, the Housing and Employment Needs Assessment. This was jointly commissioned by all the local authorities within the Coventry and Warwickshire area. It is required as the need to provide some of the evidence in terms of local plans. And some of the local authorities have got to the point that they need to review their local plans because they were adopted more than 5 years ago, so some of them now. So the reason that I brought it here is because some of those local plans are going to be published soon or imminently, and this document will be part of their evidence base, and it's just so that you're aware of it. The executive summary is attached from page 135, and I will bring forward a more detailed report in the coming months, years, in terms of how it does affect us. The information is related to housing and employment. So the employment section would probably be part of our evidence base in terms of the forthcoming employment development plan document that, of course, is within our work programme.
Okay, so I know there's a fair bit of interest in
Okay.
the Appendix A. So should we split it down and we'll do it by sections? So members, have anybody got any views on the Coventry and Warwickshire HEDNA? Mark?
Chairman, can I ask through you, Mr. Tobin, what noted means in this context? I'm happy to say it's been presented to me, because it clearly has. But in many ways, when we have noted at board, it sort of means, we've accepted it's there. I don't want to go within a million miles of accepting this. I'm happy that we say something like, the board received a report and looks forward to further information. But I don't want to put my name to anything which says I have even considered accepting this paper.
Well, I think it's a very good point, isn't it? I wouldn't consider noted to be anywhere near agreed and adopted. But Mr. Tobin advised me I'm totally right.
I'm not saying agreed and adopted, but quite often when you look at the context of papers that go through the board, noted means done.
Yeah, I agree that it could potentially be interpreted that way, and I think the addition of some words along those lines would make very clear that it's yes, we are aware of it, but we would like some more information in whatever form at whatever time, and you can move a recommendation with additional words. So if you want to choose to move it with that addition, I think perhaps in the context of this particular report, it would make the views, or what appear to be the views of the board, the subcommittee clear. And obviously, if there was also considered to be a need to have any further information at any particular time or of any particular type, you could also add that to the recommendation when moving.
Okay, well, I think that's good advice. Shall we return to that after we've considered the other 2 items and debated them? And then we'll obviously propose an amended motion. Okay, so any comments on the Coventry and Warwickshire HEDNA document, which is attached to Appendix A, which in your packs will be page 135 onwards. Councillor Simpson?
Chairman, can I just seek some clarification as to what is meant in the table that talks about B8 land? Because there is a number that is sitting very inconveniently along the North Yorkshire line. I can see in there that.
So you're referring to page 141?
Yes,
Yep.
and 142.
Yeah.
Given that there are no specific lines on the chart, I could read that as being spread across the whole of the catchment area. Equally, given that I am particularly paranoid about it, I could read that as saying that all of that is suggested for North Yorkshire, which indeed it was in other reports. So if we could have that clarified, and perhaps whoever drew this table up could be encouraged to make it clear as to what they mean, that would be helpful.
Dorothy, put Councillor Simpson's fears to rest, please.
Yes, it is a figure for the whole of the Coventry and Wiltshire area. That's why there is no lines in there. It is to be discussed, to be negotiated under the duty to cooperate or its subsequent guise as to how that actually gets subdivided or in whatever way. The figure in that table 2.1 is up to 2041, and then the figure in the following table 2.2 is up to 2050, and that's where the difference is between it.
Let's leave it till then and discuss it then.
Chairman, I'm very happy to suggest words that could be used to assist with the negotiation.
Yes. Yes, I'm sure you could. So in terms of the presentation, could we ask the author to make it clearer that he's not proposing all B8 allocation to North Warwickshire, recognising that it is a blank table? I've forgotten the fancy name of the brackets which shows all included in. Mr. Toby's very bright, isn't it?
Zeros all the way down to
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a simple table. We all use Excel.
Be careful, Mr. Toby. The last time we had one of these, we went halfway up Everest to get away from it.
Okay,
Zero in and put 606 and put.
Let's just pick up that point, and for the point of clarity, we'd like the author to make it clear that his appendix is not specifying all development in B8 in North Warwickshire. Okay.
Can I just ask a question? Sorry,
Councillor Simpson, are there any more issues that you'd like to make before Councillor Humphreys obviously brushes on to his more important points?
Chairman, it's just one, and it's table 4.1. I really don't understand the calculation behind these numbers. I clearly understand, if you will, current need, because that's something that's been through the boards. We all understood it, we know where it is. But to go from current need of 40 to get to total gross need of 256, that's what, 5 times? How has that been calculated? And what is the base for suggesting the need for social stroke affordable rented housing has gone up by that proportion in North Warwickshire? As well, perhaps, as what is the basis for everybody else? I get the point on relet supply coming to net need, but that's a dramatic increase. And I really want to understand where that is coming from, because it makes a material impact on how we deliver what we're delivering. But similarly, the rest of the housing figures, how they are split, it really will be helpful. And I know Dorothy is going to bring us more information, but it's a bit of a bombshell number to throw at us with no justification or explanation.
Dorothy, do you have a view?
In terms of the figures, yes, when we report back, we can have a look at that and see how we can explain it a lot better. But also, it may be that we ask the author of the report when it's appropriate to come and do a presentation to members so that they can fully explain the background to the information. But equally, if I can just point out that in that 4.1, if we look at the current adopted local plan, the figure of the total gross need of 256 in this table compares to a figure that we used from the strategic housing market assessment that fed into the local plan of 267. So it just shows that the number has come down slightly. It isn't much different to it is actually reflected within the adopted local plan. Although it seems excessive, it is something that was used as part of the evidence base that then goes towards the calculations of the 30% affordable housing on brownfield sites and 40% on greenfield sites. So there is that underlying figure within the adopted plan of 267, whereas this one was 256, so that has come down slightly, but not excessively. In terms of how exactly those calculations, I would have to get the author to come in and explain exactly the mechanics behind it.
Well, that sounds like a very worthwhile exercise to invite the author in and to have an in-depth conversation with us about how he's come up with the figures. Anything else to say on that, Councillor Simpson?
It was the further point, Chairman, on table 4.6, the specialist housing need for 2022 to 23. I think that this is something we are increasingly aware of, the need for these particular areas in terms of residential care, nursing care, and what have you. It would be really, I mean, I get the point that this is Coventry and the next table is Warwickshire. But actually, if we could get some sort of feel for how that breaks down into our particular subset of it, because I think we're starting from a low base. We know we've a mountain to climb with this, but it would help us to put some more numbers around it. So, well, frankly, I don't want any V8. Thank you very much. We need to do a lot of work on table 4.7 because there is a clear, obvious demand need, and anything which helps us to refine that, I think, would be really helpful.
So, in terms of this, LP7 in the local plan talks about the various needs of different parts of the community, but equally we've had discussions with David Sherwood from the County Council as well, and he's actually providing us some information as to what he would expect on some of the larger allocations in terms of that specialist housing numbers. So that's what we're looking at. That would only be a small proportion of the provision on the site, but it's still a number that we can work with and work with the developers as well to actually get a very much evidence-based and very specific needs actually catered for within those big allocations. So that's what's happening in the background as well.
I'm happy with that, Jen. If I just look at the bottom line, if you will, total bed spaces. Sometimes you're looking through these, it looks like actually it is not all that far off. But I think you've then got to overlay that with the specific need from North Warwickshire, where we know we have a greater percentage of social problems, greater percentage of illnesses, a greater percentage of an ageing population with particular needs. My honest view is that compared to other areas of Warwickshire, our need for specialist housing, particularly for the over 75s and people with morbidity issues, is substantially greater than some of the areas in the south of the county. And this will help us. I mean, I honestly get the point, Dorothy, the county being very helpful on this and they're providing a lot of useful information. But I think it needs to be a bit clearer to us. And to people like me who numbers dyslexic, I need a big red flashing number that says you've got to provide X.
Well, I think you're spot on everything you say, Mark. I think the recommendation would be amended, or the motion would be amended to to say that we invite ICD projects in to come and explain their methodology and findings to a task and finish group of the LDF, and perhaps anybody from the leadership group that would be interested as well. So that would be the first part of an amended motion. I've seen it. I'm pronouncing it right, aren't I? I've seen it.
I've seen you.
Because that's the last. That was Boudicca's tribe who were annihilated by the Romans. So must be some correlation between their name and the annihilation of the Icenians at Rugby.
Mentioned it to Margaret.
Yeah, quite. Okay. Right. Any more then on the Iceni paper, David?
I wonder if you talked about justifying the numbers, and I'm just thinking, is it just a mathematical equation? We're going to have X growth, so we need this much space as a result of it. Because I'm just thinking about, we argued against having the St Baldwin's up at Junction 10, for example. They haven't built one of the buildings at the moment, and the biggest building has only just been leased over 3 years after it was finished. Totally speculative. I think about go up to Junction 11, which is not in Warwickshire, but it's almost in Warwickshire. The whole thing was going to be, and we had that from IM Property, it was going to be a whole Jaguar Land Rover site. They've taken one building now, and DSV have taken another smaller building, and there's about 2.5 million square feet of warehousing up there not being used. So is the growth there? Is COVID effective? All the sort of reasons you can have. But I just wondered, where are they based in and who come up with those numbers? Was it was it the government? Like I say, we said, oh, we need to grow by X, so we'll stick that bit there and that bit there, rather than, my point of view, the M42 is a wonderful thing because you can get anywhere from it. Unfortunately, everybody with an HGV can also come here from it. So I'd like some question about where those numbers come from.
Okay, thank you, David. Mark?
So the M42 is a wonderful thing. You can never get anywhere on it.
Oh,
It's that's my experience. I think the answer, to an extent, and Dorothy, I'm sure, will correct me, is depends where you draw the box. Because if you draw the box in parts of the West Midlands, the argument is that there's only 3 months supply of B8. If you draw the box in a slightly wider area, then actually the provision is greater and the need is less. Developers will always try and get any argument that they can to have whatever development they can make money on. Let's forget Peddymore. Peddymore was allocated in the Birmingham City Council's Green Belt as an exceptional need to fix the problems created by the recession in, I think, the 1980s, 1990s. It's only just been delivered. My God, have we still got the recession from the 1990s, and yet they're now developing it? All of these arguments over what is needed are, in my view, questionable. I have got no doubt that we need an awful lot of development because we've got a growing population and they need jobs and they need houses. But what I think they don't always do is look at the cascade effect. When John Winter, bless him, always used to make an absolutely sound point that in North Warwickshire we were consistently told about how much more industrial land we needed. But nobody ever counted all of the land that was formerly taken up by the coal industry. And that was simply just lost. It disappeared. And we had to allocate more and more land to take over and replace the land which had, in theory, been lost, but it had never been lost. It's still there. And actually, when you look at certainly some of our own colliery sites, it's very effective, productive, economic land. There are lots of bits of land in the West Midlands and other areas that could be repositioned, repurposed. Doesn't necessarily mean it's got to be a bit of green belt land just because it's on the edge of a motorway junction.
Right.
And so I think my answer, David, is it's a question of where you draw the box and how you start calculating the need. And to my mind, this report has the reason for it was the local authorities perceived that the LEP produced report was clearly on one side of the spectrum, and perhaps we need something to rebalance the spectrum. I'm just not sure that this does it. Not necessarily because I know it doesn't do it, because I don't understand it yet.
Okay, those are really good points, aren't they? And hopefully they will be open to discussion when the ICNIs invade. I think the issue, the debate has proven that there's nowhere in the ICNI summary that talks about transport need or extended transport provision as well. And really, if we are going down the line of, proposing employment, land and housing growth, we're mad not to do it without a really clear transport strategy, which talks about movement of commuting, talks about movement of goods, whether that be road, rail or air. I presume it exists hand in hand.
This is only one piece of the jigsaw in terms of the evidence for a future policy document, local plan policy document of some sort. So this would have to be taken into account alongside a strategic transport assessment for the borough or for a particular area. And then there would have to be all the other evidence as well in terms of the historic environment, landscape and flooding that would all have to be taken into account. So this wouldn't deal with the transport issue itself, because this is only providing us with a information on the baseline of the numbers that we need to provide for a planned period. So then you have to add in all the other pieces of the jigsaw to then make that mosaic of what then will be the planning policy for the particular area.
Totally, but I think the point is an important point, isn't it? I mean, one of the first things I did 8 years ago was be involved in a working group on behalf of North Warwickshire for the new Warwickshire Transport Strategy.
Yes.
It still hasn't been produced, and that was 8 years ago. And it seems as though locally we need to start being concerted in terms of the pressure we put on to demand that where we talk about development, we talk about transport and we talk about anything else. And perhaps as far as we can, we refuse to talk about one in isolation. But we will only talk about housing growth if it is accompanied by really clear transport plans, because this is how we get out of step with everything, isn't it? We end up with a local plan and a half commitment from government and national highways to do the A5, but not a full commitment. How did you manage to get all of the A5 in Tamworth like it is, Michael? You played a blinder there.
I'm not sure how that happened either, to be honest, Joe.
Okay. Doc, do those statements need a response from you, or are you happy to move on?
I'm happy to move on.
Okay then. Right, so let's move on to, indeed of all things, a discussion about employment.
This is a West Midlands strategic employment study, which has just been out to tender. Hopefully we do have somebody that will be successful in that. Unfortunately, I'm not able to update you on that with Christmas, but I will update members as soon as I can as to who's been appointed there. This is a study that actually Councillor Simpson was referring to, which has got these boxes on these previous studies. In 2015, it had box A and box B and all of those things. There was a further study that was commissioned, but unfortunately, very few local authorities were actually involved with it, so it doesn't have that planning perspective on it. As you can see, 25 local authorities have actually joined together to commission this report, and it's at least a 6 months contract, so we won't see the results of it until at least the summer, and it may be a little bit longer than that, but hopefully by the summer we should see the results of this work. And as soon as we get it, we'll be able to share it with members.
So will that go some way to answering my concerns? Sorry.
It will go a little bit of the way. I can't say because it's got a very wide remit, but it is trying to get and hone down this idea of, well, how much employment land of a strategic nature is required across the whole of the West Midlands. As part of the brief, they should be taking account of comments from the transport authorities, and that should be a key part of the proposals. And we just have to wait and see what the process is of this. So I'm afraid as we sit here today, I can't give you a categoric answer, yes or no, I'm afraid.
Okay, Michael?
Mine's just a quick comment. I'm aware of the time, Chair, so I think Dorothy's right. Until we've got the final assessment and outcome, it's hard to have a view of what that's going to be. We'd all be second guessing what it's going to be. When we've got the clearer picture, I think then it's the opportunity not only for us to comment, but all the other councillors as well.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else questions on the West Midlands employment? Sorry, strategic
I couldn't say to you, I just think what Dorothy said, the frightening word, if it becomes strategic, then it comes out, it'd be like going back to the days of Ham's Hall, it would just get imposed. That's the frightener.
Yeah. The deft hand of the pirates, not sticking to the pirate code. Yeah, okay, Dorothy?
Just very quickly though, in the local plan, we do have policy LP6, which does talk about strategic employment sites. And we don't have any figures against that at the moment in terms of, well, what does that mean for North Warwickshire? And it was very clear at the examination that if we did not have such a policy, we would not have got the local plan through the process. So it is a matter that we will have to deal with at some stage in the future.
Thanks, super. Mark?
That's absolutely right, Chairman, but don't forget, it says particularly where the evidence demonstrates an immediate need. I will be looking for evidence of an immediate need, as opposed to release Birmingham's Greenbelt and do it 30 years later.
Very true. Totally.
Okay, thank you. Dot, I can see people packing up. The villa have kicked off.
Okay.
Letter from Birmingham City Council, which comes bearing good news for the new year.
It is. Instead of the 38,000 shortfall in dwellings, it's now 78. I said that very quickly, just so that I skirt over it. And 73 hectares short of employment land. It's just really just so that you're aware that there is that issue. We've already had a meeting with officers from the City Council, and we've also asked that before they go out for consultation on their next version of their local plan, that we have a joint members meeting so that they can explain what they've done within their plan and also how they're going to treat the numbers that are already within our adopted local plan.
Mark?
Happy to have a meeting and let them explain it, Chairman, but as I remember last time, after they came up with their big number shortfall, an awful lot of other people were saying, actually, Birmingham's got this totally wrong, and their numbers are materially less than their stated plan. So I think before we had the meeting with them, for them to tell us how much they want of North Warwickshire, I'd want to see the, if you like, the other parties' arguments, where, you know, and particularly those who said last time, Birmingham, I'm totally sorry, but you're way over the mark in terms of what you need. I'm just not sure I trust their numbers after the last time.
Michael?
Mine's a very quick comment on the back of Mark. Yeah, if they've got the numbers wrong with that figure, and now they're giving us a new figure, it sort of paints the picture that Mark's saying. So.
It certainly does. Okay, complex. All right, well, let's get the meeting arranged and see what pre-meeting work we can do, Dot. Okay. Any more on any of the three items in this agenda before I ask Mr. Tobin to create a recommendation that we can vote on? See, I gave you a warning there. No more questions. Go on, it was a second warning.
Generally, I think the primary report's on the first item and it's Councillor Simpson's comments. If I just go back to the note I made at the time. So I think it was a general requirement for additional information, and I don't think I think it could perhaps be harmful to make it too specific. That if members want to have some additional information, I mean, by all means, give examples in any amended recommendation votes, but perhaps it's appropriate to make it non-exclusive in terms of saying further information, including those points, in particular around the head note.
So the recommendation would be that members consider the reports and ask for further information. One, an invitation to Iceni to come and present on methodology and findings. Two, noting strategic employment study and looking forward to an update. And then three, to invite Birmingham City Council to meet with Watford Borough Council to present on their calculations, the housing need and employment land calculations.
Yeah, that would.
Yeah. You must get that down, Dot.
I'm very happy with that. Anything that avoids any suggestion that we accept, adopt, think is a good idea. It's good for me.
Did you manage to get that down as well, Maria, for the minutes? Excellent. Okay then. Right, so proposed by me, seconded by Michael. All those in favour? Oh, any against? Any abstentions?
I'm trying hard just not to vote. But if you want me to vote, I will.
Yes, we do.
It's not a vote for it, it's a vote for what
Well,
you
hang on,
said.
he blurted it out and didn't say what he was going to vote for.
Hate it.
What are you going to vote for?
I will vote for it.
For. Right, excellent. Unanimous.
I do. Pretty.
Right, that brings us, I'm pleased to say, swiftly to the end of the agenda. We'll reconvene on Friday.